Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. If you're learning a new language, or at least trying to, then you're in the right place. My name is Olly Richards, and I have spent a lot of years messing around with languages, struggling more than I should, but learning a few things along the way about languages and language learning. And on this podcast, I'm here to help you with your language learning, your questions, your struggles, whatever they may be. Now, I'm coming to you today from a very different place indeed, and it's on my right currently. Well, actually, no, let me backtrack. As I speak, I'm currently climbing over a gate on a public footpath in the southwest of England. I think it's called a stile, isn't it? Can't remember exactly what it's called. You know, where you got like these kind of bits of wood and you step up and get over a gate. I used to know what they're called. I can't remember what they're called anymore. That's what 20 years of living around the world does for you. You end up forgetting your own vocabulary. So I'm walking through a bunch of fields. There's a busy motorway in the distance, which you might be able to hear, but I'm surrounded by trees and greenery, and it's really, really nice. I've been enjoying using my kind of walking time to record podcasts recently. Whenever I get fed up of thinking, which happens all too easily, then I kind of just clip on the mic and record a podcast, and the quality seems to be pretty good. So anyway, if you'd like to see the kind of places that I'm at right now when I'm recording these for you, then I've been posting some pictures on my Instagram at I Will Teach You a Language. So head over there and say hi, and you'll be able to see kind of where I am as I'm recording these. So anyway, we've got a bunch of questions coming in from you guys at the moment, which is great. I will be working my way through those. Of course, keep sending your questions, because that's what I do here. If I don't have your questions, then you're going to be forced to listening to me ramble about stuff for 20 minutes, which nobody wants, and I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. So send me your questions at the usual place, iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask. All right then, without any further ado, let's get into today's question from Lizzie.
Hi, I just want to say that your podcast has helped me a lot on my language learning journey. So my question, I haven't watched or listened to all of your podcasts, obviously, because you have a lot of amazing ones. But I'm learning Japanese right now, and it is so amazing, and the culture is spectacular. But I'm very confused about, I know you've talked about word structure and sentence order in general, but I was wondering if you could go specifically with Japanese word order and sentence structure, especially because I know when you talk in different politeness forms, that can change sentences completely. So I know that you've learned Japanese, so if you have any tips on that, like, resources to look at, things to read, must-knows, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Hey Lizzie, thank you so much for your question, and I love getting questions about Japanese. I can talk about Japanese all day long, and last year I kind of did last year, because I was recording Japanese Uncovered, which is my Japanese program based on story learning, and I was kind of, for the best part of the second half of last year, I was just immersed in teaching Japanese, which is, it's always an interesting transition, when you go from learning a language to actually teaching a language. And I'll be the first to say, my Japanese is not perfect, definitely not. But what I have done, I think one of the real things that I feel like I have to offer with Japanese is that I've been through this process which Lizzie's talking about, of kind of just this overall confusion about what's going on, and I've kind of been through that, come out the other side, and although there are certain things in my Japanese which definitely could be better, such as my kanji and my vocabulary in certain areas, one of the things that I was very good at getting my head round was this question of word order, sentence structure, stuff like that. And I've met a lot of people, and some quite famous names actually, who you might know, have tried to learn Japanese and talked about how they've eventually given up learning Japanese, basically because they never managed to get their heads around the way that you communicate in Japanese, which in a very kind of simplistic way we could call word order and sentence structure. For me, it's more than that. I mean, and we'll get into that in my answer to Lizzie's question. But there is a kind of process that you have to go through with Japanese, and I would say, most Asian languages in general. Just climbing over another gate here, and that is going through this process of trying to figure out what's going on, trying to follow along with the ideas in the order in which they're expressed, because it doesn't work in the same way as it does in English. And so the process of learning Japanese or other Asian languages is really the process of learning to think in the order that a Japanese person thinks in. And that's really important to start off with, because anything else you do has got to, it all sits within this overall concept of learning to think in the order in which a Japanese person thinks. Okay. So, Lizzie, you mentioned word order and sentence structure. I think we can start off by talking about that in a very micro sense. So there are certain things in Japanese which, like in any language, just have to be learnt, right? So there are little things like where the adjective comes and so for example, basic word order in Japanese, whereas in English you would say he saw the cat. In Japanese, you say he, the cat, saw. Okay, 彼は猫を見ました. And so rather than subject, verb, object, it's subject, object, verb. So these things kind of change around, right? And then you kind of have to learn things like, where adjectives come. You've got to learn where verbs come. So generally at the end of the sentence, there are all these little things you've got to learn. And this stuff can be difficult if it's the first time you've learned a foreign language and you're just trying to wrap your head around that. But I don't want to spend too much time on this because, to be honest with you, it's not that difficult. It's just something to get used to. And the most useful thing I think I can give you for that is just to say that whatever textbook or resource you're using, just work your way through it, do the exercises. You'll get used to that stuff pretty quickly, and before long, in Japanese, you'll automatically be putting the verb at the end of the sentence, for example. If we spent too long talking about that, I'd give you the impression that stuff is harder than it is. It's not hard, really. It's just new in the same way that learning any language is new, right? There is a bigger picture thing which we need to think about with Japanese, and this is like what I was saying earlier, which is the order in which we express ideas. And this is when we move kind of beyond simple sentences into the way that people talk. Now, I was thinking about the best way to a good way to explain this, and an analogy might be a little bit like this. Imagine you're reading a newspaper and you're reading an opinion column. Where you get these very kind of opinionated journalists giving their savvy take on things that are going on in society and stuff like that. So what you don't get in these opinion columns is very kind of straightforward writing. People are always trying to be clever, aren't they? They're trying to kind of be creative and artistic in their writing, and so they should, because we all like to have interesting writing to read, don't they? So let's take a really mundane example. Let's say that there is somebody writing an opinion piece in a newspaper, and they're talking about, I don't know, social media and the evils of social media and how it's frying everyone's brain and turning them crazy and stuff like that. So if this person was going to write a piece like that, they might start off by saying something like, so they might start off with a quote, for example, and then they might explain the quote, and then at the very end give their opinion on the subject. So, like, for example, they might start off this piece with a quote. The whole thing starts off with a quote from someone saying, "My brain was frazzled. I couldn't concentrate for more than 5 seconds at a time. I snapped at people and my grades at school went down." End quote. Then you might move on to explain what that was all about. That was Sophie, a 17-year-old high school student who was struggling with social media, blah, blah, blah. And then at the very end, that's when the person gives their opinion. So it might be something like, "And so I think we should ban social media." The end. Right, so we've gone from a quote, "My brain was frazzled," to explaining it, saying that was a quote from Sophie, 17, who was blah, 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 to then giving your opinion. We should ban social media. Now, for us as English speakers, when we're reading that stuff, we kind of find it entertaining because it's not normal writing. We're reading someone's opinion. But what we have to do as the reader is we have to be able to kind of hold all the information in our head and read through the entire article, get to the end in order to actually hear the opinion of the person that we were hearing from in the first place. All right? So if all you did was read the first part of the article, then all you're going to get is this random quote, and you're not going to understand what it's about. Then if you carried on and you read through to the first half of the article, you get the explanation, maybe a few facts, but you're not necessarily going to know what the point is, right? It's only once you reach right to the end of the article where the columnist says, therefore I think, my opinion is social media should be banned. Like, you've got to read right through to the end before you actually get the point. Okay? So for us as English speakers, when we read this, we're capable of reading this, okay? But a child might struggle to follow the thread, and frankly, someone who's not particularly literate or educated might also struggle to follow the thread of an article like that, right? That's kind of that's normal. It's a kind of a normal part of kind of entertaining, educated writing. It basically kind of leads you around the houses a bit, and that is what entertains us. Now, the thing about Japanese is that all Japanese is a bit like that. Okay? Whereas in English we tend to sort of say what we think in a pretty straightforward way, or at least for us. It's the way that we're kind of taught to think. Whereas that's the way the things are done in English. In Japanese, they don't do things that way. They do it in a different way. So, a kind of real simple example of that would be if you wanted to say in English, the man who I saw yesterday, our way of thinking is, okay, the man, say what the thing is, and then who I saw yesterday, give some more information. In Japanese, it's the opposite. It's like, say, in Japanese, you'd say, the who I saw yesterday, man. And so in order to understand that, you've got to kind of hold this information in your head until the end of the sentence when you get to man. So it's the what? I don't know. Who I saw yesterday. Okay, you saw him yesterday, but I still don't know what. Man. The who I saw yesterday. Man. Okay, right. Oh, the man you saw yesterday. So things are opposite, and they're turned around in funny ways for us as English speakers. And so this holds true in Japanese, whether you're talking about a single sentence or a kind of whole wide paragraph or an entire article or whatever it may be. And so this is a very long-winded way of saying, for me, the big journey that I've had to go on in making sense of Japanese has been one of learning to hold information in my head long enough to understand the overall point of what's going on. Okay? Let me say that again because it's really important. The journey of learning to get comfortable and confident in Japanese has been one of learning to hold information in my head for long enough for it all to kind of come together and make sense, and for me to figure out what is going on. And that's the challenge with Japanese, whether you're speaking to someone or whether you're reading an article or reading a book or whatever it may be. And that's a pretty difficult challenge, because when you think about like holding information in your head, what are the things that you have to hold in your head? Well, you've got to hold vocabulary, words, which means you've got to know enough vocabulary in the first place. You've got to hold concepts. Who I saw yesterday, man. There's actually quite a lot of stuff in there. You've got to know grammar, like basic grammar, well enough to just be able to make sense of these little parts as you hear them. So there's a lot of stuff in there that you've got to know a lot of the language in order to be able to hold stuff in your head in the first place. All right, so that's the kind of overall challenge, and it's a big one, and it really takes. You've got to think of it in that macro perspective. So I'm just opening a gate here because there's no stile, so I'm having to open up this gate and then climb through. So that's the journey that you go on in Japanese. And when people fail at Japanese, in my experience, it's because they never really get to grips with that one point. They never get to grips with with like they never get to the point where they understand enough and they can hold enough information in their head to be able to really kind of converse and express ideas in the way that a Japanese person would, right? So what does this mean for you, Lizzie? So it's all very well me kind of saying this, but what I'm talking about here is really a journey of 2 or more years to be able to understand, to be able to kind of get to this point. Well, what it means is that you're never going to get to this point of clarity by learning rules, studying grammar, doing all the kind of like the nitty-gritty McNuggets of language learning the way that you learn it in a traditional way. It's not going to happen because there's too much that you need to know. This question of kind of getting used to a language and the way things are presented, raising your overall level to the point where you can follow along. Like, this is not a question of just learning the little rules or whatever. This is a question of just being so comfortable with the language that it just starts to inhabit your thinking and your thoughts and things like that. So what this means is that you have to take an approach of getting as much exposure and immersion as possible to the language. Okay, so step one, as always, is learn the basics. Okay, and any textbook will work for that, whichever you like. Just use that. Learn the basics of the rule. But then, as soon as you've got the basics together, what you've got to do then is just spend as much time listening and reading to Japanese as possible. Reading to, I always make that mistake. You can't say listening and reading to Japanese. Reading and listening to Japanese. You've got to spend as much time immersed in the language as possible. And the real trick with this is to find stuff that is at your level. Because again, this is another kind of feature of Asian languages. There's always a huge gulf between the beginner material and the native material. There's a massive step up, so you've got to find material which is kind of in the middle, that's accessible enough for you. And of course, that's what I do. That's what the stuff that I make, right? Here at I Will Teach You a Language. So you've got to spend as much time immersed in the language as possible. And the more that you do that, the longer you do that for, the faster this word order and sentence structure that you're talking about is going to become clear to you through a process of just getting used to it. And that's really, as unhelpful as that is, that's really all there is to it. You know, that we were talking recently, I think it was on the podcast, or it might have been in my Polyglot Playbook course, about the concept of being comfortable with ambiguity, tolerance for ambiguity. And this is really key with Japanese, because you're going to start, if you do what I say, then you'll start to kind of listen and read more Japanese, and you'll find yourself getting frustrated, because that's what happens with Japanese. You think, man, this is just too hard. I just don't understand. There's too much stuff I don't know here. It's very ambiguous. But the more that you can be happy with this ambiguity of reading entire sentences and not understanding, but saying to yourself, you know what, that's okay. I'm doing the right thing. Let's carry on anyway, because I'm just increasing my overall strength, understanding, tolerance, knowledge. The more that you can train yourself to do that, the more successful you're going to be. So that's the kind of overall aim, and the best way to actually give yourself an advantage with that is to find material that's not too hard. Because if you try and read newspaper articles from the beginning, you'll quickly lose motivation. So you've got to find material which kind of gives you that exposure through listening and reading, but also isn't too hard, and it isn't so hard that you just can't get to grips with it in the first place. And that is the particular problem that I'm trying to solve in the world, by making material which is at that kind of in that middle ground. I haven't done enough in Japanese yet. Really, I want to do more, especially in the book side of things. We do have Japanese short stories in the works, actually, with Teach Yourself, but they're going to be intermediate level, so they're going to be a little bit harder than probably too hard for beginner level. But I'm looking at ways I can make more stuff in Japanese. it is one of my little passions, as you know. So I'm trying to figure out how to do it. But this thing, I really believe, ladies and gentlemen, that this thing of so tolerance for ambiguity, right? I heard Scott Young from fantastic blogger, post in his New Year. I think it was a New Year social media post or something like that. He said one of the things to aim for this year is gradually increase your capacity to do hard things. And I think this is one of the keys to the kingdom, you know. I really think this is one of the secrets to just getting better at everything in life. It's whatever you want to do that you find hard. And in my case, I find it harder and harder to sit down and read books without getting distracted by stuff. Like the one thing that I want to try and do more of is to sit down and read books, because in this in this age, it's just distraction is more and more difficult. It's a simple thing, but it can be hard, right? So one of your aims needs to be to gradually increase your capacity to do hard things. And that can be one step at a time, 1% every day, 1% every week, whatever. Just gradually try to get better at it. And this is what applies to language learning, and particularly to Japanese in this context. It's like, okay, yes, so you say, basically what I'm saying here is you need to listen to and read more Japanese in order to get used to the sentence structure, right? How do you do that? Through listening and reading a lot. What makes that difficult? Well, it's because there's a big jump up. And then how do you solve that problem? Well, you use material which is kind of at your level or not too hard. And then it's still hard, so what do? Well, you just gradually increase your capacity to do that thing which you're finding hard. Right? So if you're finding it hard, just aim for 5 minutes. And then the next day maybe you can do 6 minutes. And the next day maybe you can do 7 minutes. Just gradually increasing your ability, your patience, your resilience in doing something that's hard. And the more that you do that, the more success you will find. You'll find success coming in a straight line, totally proportional to the amount that you can increase your ability to do difficult things. So, Lizzie, I'm going to guess that was a completely useless answer. But I think it is the truth, and it is the answer which everything else. It's kind of the umbrella under which everything else has to fall. You know, yes, there are kind of tricks and micro things that you can do to learn about word order and grammar in Japanese, but the big picture message is that the only way that you really get used to this stuff and become comfortable with sentence structure in Japanese, the way that people communicate, is by immersing yourself in the language so much that you just get used to it. Okay, so you asked for resources. At the beginning, just use whatever you're using, whatever textbook you're using. As long as you like it, keep going through it. If you want something from me, you can look at my Japanese Uncovered course. It's not particularly cheap. But what Japanese Uncovered does is it gets you reading and listening right from the start, and the whole thing works through story, right? So you're kind of combining everything I'm talking about here in one method, and I actually teach that course myself as well, so you get lessons from me throughout. So that's there if you want it, but you don't need to use that. You can use any textbook that you happen to like. And then I would also, once you've kind of completed your beginner's course, try to resist the temptation to keep studying in quotes, because as long as you keep studying Japanese with textbooks and kanji workbooks and things like that, you'll never finish. It's endless. So instead, you want to step up to reading and listening to real things. So try and get yourself some graded readers. You might look at like my conversations course, for example, which we have in Japanese. We're working on Grammar Hero as well in Japanese, which is a little bit harder than conversations, but still, that's there. And there's plenty of other people around making cool stuff as well. But the point is, you want to be just immersing yourself more and more in that kind of intermediate level material. Wow, I've gone on for much longer than I intended to. Lizzie, I hope that was helpful. Again, this is my perspective on it. Yeah, what can I say? I could go on for another 2 hours. that's what happens if you ask me about Japanese, you see. If you asked me about another language, I would have just given you a 5-minute answer and just said, yeah, just read and listen, it's kind of easy. With Japanese, because I've had such a kind of long process with it myself, I kind of feel like I've got a duty to convey what I really think about it. So anyway, maybe Lizzie, let me know if that was helpful or not. You can reach me out on Instagram at I Will Teach You a Language. Just if you enjoyed this, take a screenshot of this episode on your phone, post it to Instagram, tag me at I Will Teach You a Language, and let me know what you thought of it. For better or for worse, if you hated it, tell me to shut up and stop rambling, and I will gratefully receive that message. But otherwise, I think I'll leave it there. If you'd like to ask me a question, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask, ASK, to do that. And I think it's about time I stopped talking. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way, through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT, and if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.